Hi everyone, it's Christy from Green Eyed Tarot. Today I am here to introduce a new series I'm doing on my channel about the scary tarot cards and getting comfortable with the ones that are a little bit more uncomfortable. And what do I mean by that? Well, if someone who knows nothing about tarot cards picks up a deck, they may immediately be confronted with some really uncomfortable and less than positive imagery. So images of like the tower collapsing and people looking like they're falling to their doom, and a demon looking creature with some humans shackled to it, a figure laying on the ground impaled by 10 swords, which may not be that disturbing if you're a Game of Thrones fan. Even someone who's read tarot for years and years like I have can have mixed feelings about this imagery that we're presented with in the tarot deck. We've all been there. You sit down with your tarot cards and maybe you've cleansed them. Maybe you've had said a small like incantation or a prayer over them. You've shuffled and split them and you pull the card. And if you're like me, you get like a little zap of energy, or I get like butterflies in my stomach. Even now, even after reading tarot for as many years as I have and using it, I still get these little butterflies in my stomach. So you turn it over, right? You turn over your card that you pulled, and there it is, right? Death. Good times, right? Thank you so much for your loving support, tarot deck, and your horrible sense of humor. But no, you're not going to die yet. We are all going to die someday, right? But as we all know, this card typically doesn't have to do with physical death. So that's why today I just wanted to chat about ways that I've reframed some of the more confronting and uncomfortable cards, and how we can invite being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And then eventually maybe we get comfortable with it so it doesn't feel so scary or unsettling. And no, I don't mean that these are scary cards. They're just typically known as scary. These are, typically pieces of paper. So they're not really scary. They're not going to hurt us. But those of us who do read tarot, and especially the way we read it, it can feel unsettling and it can feel uncomfortable. And also just to remember that any tarot card's meaning is going to change within the context of the guidance that you're seeking and the situation that you're inquiring about, and the other cards in the reading, right? Unless you're doing a one card reading, there's always going to be a cohesive dynamic, and the reading is a sum of all of its parts. So I think of things like a 3-card reading. So if we're going to do a 3-card spread, let's say the way we learned in elementary school when we were in English class, right? There's nouns, there's verbs, there's adjectives, there's predicates, although I don't know what those are anymore. But each card helps form a sentence, right? Or a whole narrative. So even the so-called negative cards have a place in that narrative. And just one caveat before I proceed is I read tarot in a very therapeutic, holistic, and introspective way. I do not use tarot really for divination per se. I use a lot of open-ended questioning. That's the basis for my readings, and I rarely seek yes or no answers when reading tarot. My personal tarot practice centers around my behaviors, reactions, actions, my thought patterns, and how these are playing out in front of, in different areas of my life. I do seek clarification on external factors that may be influencing me, because things like our environment, our relationships, our family dynamics, the workplace culture, career, these are all important contexts within which we exist. But I just wanted to clarify how I read tarot, and that it is a very personal to me, and everyone experiences tarot differently. So let's get comfortable with death. I've heard the death card interpreted in some really helpful and insightful ways. My favorite way of looking at this card is as a goodbye. And so I have here the death card from the This Might Hurt Tarot, the mass market. And then this is just a traditional, pretty much standard Rider-Waite-Smith. So I have both of them just so that we have sort of more of a modern look and the more of the traditional look at these cards. But This Might Hurt is a modern clone of the Rider-Waite-Smith. So just sort of seeing these side by side, I thought it might be helpful to have a more modern take and the more traditional, but they're very similar images. But my favorite way of looking at this card is as a goodbye, or just reframing it sort of as a goodbye. So looking at this as more of a goodbye and then really examining what remains behind. So this card, the Death card, is full of intense Scorpio energy. But sometimes rather than a quick death with like finality, it can be something that feels like a slow burning out, like a fire that, slowly just ends up burning out. And if we don't feed the fire, it will extinguish on its own. So sometimes I look at this as like giving oxygen to something that no longer serves us. And it also maybe means the death of a small part of ourselves. So it also feels like the universe may take care of some of these goodbyes without our consent, which is where the grieving comes in. We feel a lack of control. We don't have control over certain things that end or go away in our lives. Sometimes we do. I think for me, the key with this card is that there is some control. Like there are things that I control over. There are things that I can control saying goodbye to. But then there's things that the universe is just going to feel needs to exit my life or not be a part of my life or not be a part of me anymore. And that's where our grieving comes in, because we didn't consent to that goodbye. And grieving happens for so many things, not just physical death. Losing a part of ourselves that we might have relied on for so long time can be like losing a friend. I mean, we all have defense mechanisms, right? We've heard that phrase used in psychology and, in the world of psychotherapy. So losing a defense mechanism that we've had can be like losing a big part of ourselves or something that may have protected us. But on the flip side of that, pruning also allows for new growth. So we prune hedges, we prune plants. Just this morning, I cut off the dead blooms off of my peace lily, and I removed all of the old leaves, making room for the new blooms to develop. So I love thinking about the Death card in relation to pruning. Just sort of either the universe removes it or we remove it as an active choice from our lives. And it could be a part of ourselves. It could be the loss of a job. It's definitely not necessarily physical death, but more of a goodbye that we might have to say. So I thought it would be good to look at some other examples. So we have, traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery here. But I thought it would be cool to just sort of look at some other interpretations of the Death card, because I also feel like the meanings that we apply to these cards to sort of make them not so uncomfortable and not so confronting, is definitely helpful in reframing them, but it also can help if we see different imagery. If we're not presented with this imagery that's so unsettling, and can be so negative, or scary, quote unquote scary. So one of the best examples of just cards being reimagined and reinterpreted in really deep and different ways is the Tarot of the Abyss. Anna Torian has just created a masterpiece here, and I absolutely adore this deck, and I'm not going to talk so much about the deck, but it is a really great example of cards being reframed and reinterpreted. A lot of tarot decks have reinterpreted the Rider-Waite-Smith and have done different things. I just really love, for me and the personal way in which I use tarot, this deck really speaks to me, and the way that she's created these cards really speaks to me. So this is the Death card from the Tarot of the Abyss by Anna Torian. And you can see it's quite different from the Rider-Waite-Smith interpretation. We have this sort of figure here who does look like more like of a crone energy, an older, more wizened, more wise person. And, with this flowing cape, and we open it up and we see this tree with roots in the ground and sort of it, going up into this figure, just that idea of, again, the right, death and rebirth. We always talk about death as being sort of a transformative card. The transformational aspect of it is a more positive way of looking at death. It's not, something dying, it's changing into something else. We're pruning what we don't need. So I just love this, with the tree and the roots, maybe like our foundations are steady. The foundations are where they need to be. Like we have a solid foundation, but there's things that need to be pruned. We need to prune things away so that new growth can occur. So I just love this interpretation. So that's from Tarot of the Abyss. Now this one is from the Super Lunaris Tarot, which is another wonderful deck, a more modern take, but just a wonderful, just really, really deep, really, it's a really narrative deck, and it's definitely a little bit more modern. But if we see here the death, and it's a little bit dark, I know, it's like hard to kind of see all this detail on the cards, but we see this sort of this little tiny sprout coming out of the ground, and this looks like a forest fire. And, I love sort of that imagery of, sometimes they do controlled burns, or like from what I understand, sometimes they burn forest fire as a way, they burn forest as a way, is intentional. It's an intentional burning. And so like when I look at this card, I think, oh my gosh, this is the control. This is the control that we have in this death card, this controlling the fire. Like, I'm going to burn this away so that this new growth can occur, so that I can clear away all this clutter and, things that don't serve me, and toxic, traits that I have, or behaviors, or just whatever needs pruning, or toxic relationships, or whatever we think it is that needs to be pruned. This is the control. It's a controlled burn. You know what I mean? And sometimes, on the other hand of it, like we were talking about, the universe has other plans for us and forces this death without our consent. That would be a raging forest fire that was, started by lightning. You know what I mean? That's a force of nature that cannot be controlled. And it wasn't our choice, and we did not give consent, for this. So both of those sort of dichotomies I see in this card. I just think it's a beautiful aspect of the death card, and a beautiful way of it being representative as this fire. It really just sort of is like an aha. It's like an aha for me when I see cards like that. So here we have my favorite deck, the Tarot of the Hidden Realm. And I love this deck for its up close and intimate nature. I know some people have, trouble with this deck because of that. But for me, this adds different layers. This is a very personal, because you're so up close, and facial expressions, and really having to hone in and like intuitively get intuitive hits off of like things like body posture and facial expressions, and like the way that like the hair is like flowing behind. I love this deck for that. It's one of the reasons I love this deck so much. So it's because it's a very up close and personal deck. So it's really that humanistic experience. And I love that it's set in a realm of like fae type creatures, but it really makes them human. It gives them human qualities, and just like the things that all humans sort of go through. So I do love that about this deck. So this is just another interpretation of the death card. And this, is, to me, it's more of a fierce, I don't feel fear in this card. And I think that's one of the reasons I love it. So we're moving away from treating death as fear. We're definitely moving away from like treating death as something to fear, and maybe something to embrace and invite it in so that we can grow and we can let go of the things that no longer serve us. So for me, I feel a lot of strength in this death card. There's really no fear. Now, this is from the Magical Nature Tarot, another one of my favorite decks. I haven't had it for too long, but I have been using it religiously because I absolutely adore this deck. But this deck, to me, because it has such a nice grounding energy, the Magical Nature Tarot, it's a very grounding energy, this deck. I see, death as being more of something that's not as abstract. I feel it more as like, I can understand it more. And if you see, there's like obviously a skull, but it's smiling. It has a smile on its face. And there's like a flower here. And I don't know if you can see, but to me, like I see faces here. This death card really pulls in a lot of like ancestral feelings, like ancestral knowledge. Like to me, I see faces here sort of in this like ether above, the skull. And it makes me think of the death of ancestors and the people who've gone before, and how much that wisdom could be guiding me through my journey, through my little deaths that I experience in my life, and those little goodbyes and things that I have to let go of. That there's some there's somebody, I'm not alone, if that makes sense. I'm not alone. There's support. There's like ancestral energy there. So that's how I look at this card, and it's sort of how I see that, for this death card. So just another layer, again, another sort of layer of meaning that I'm getting from this same card, the death card, but just totally reimagined in a different way. And I'm getting a lot more meaning from this. So it's helpful when you have a few different decks that are different, that have different imagery. For me, that's how I feel. I have like a few different decks that I use that will gives me a different perspective on the cards based on the artwork and the different imagery. And then here we have, of course, the Light Seers Tarot. The Light Seers Tarot, again, is another one of those decks that I feel reimagines some of these cards in really unique and beautiful ways. So now the death card is labeled Death Rebirth, which again is all part of that transformation, right? So this is one of those cards it's not scary, right? It presents this card in a more comforting way. It's definitely more positive. We've sort of reframed it into sort of this understanding that we can take this cloak down, and then there's another life, there's another face there, there's just as much of yourself still there, even though we might have said goodbye to something. So again, it's just a beautiful depiction, of that death card. Okay, so we're moving away from death, and we're gonna get right into the good old devil. So here we have the Devil card, and I have had to reckon with the Devil card because it's my birth card. So the Devil is something that I've come to terms with because I've done a lot of work around this card because it is my birth card. So the Devil, right? That good old demon from hell who's gonna suck your soul from your body, right? All very dramatic, and words we usually associate with the devil are like things like addiction and temptation and bondage. But for me, I like to be honest about this, right? Carnal pleasure is okay, right? It's okay to feel good, whether that be through sex or indulging in deliciously rich foods or anything that makes us feel good, right? A little hedonistic behavior never hurt anyone, right? But that's not the message that many of us received growing up, right? Like, so some of us, and maybe not all of us, but some of us may have received messages like, you have sex to make babies, right? That's the only reason we procreate, and that's the only reason that we should be engaging in sexual behavior is to make babies, and that's it. So the devil is really a Christian construct that does have cultural and historical foundations in the pre-Christian world. I'm not getting into a religious debate here, but basically many religious messages, that tell us that we're going to hell if we blank, right? Insert whatever sin you'd like in there. So this card can be really confronting for people who have a complicated relationship with organized religion. And again, I'm not here to debate religion, and I'm not here to, negate anyone's religious beliefs at all. I'm just saying that it could be confronting for some people that have had complicated relationships and complicated connections with organized religion. I think of this card as more of a warning that I better understand the risks of overindulgence or engaging in like toxic behaviors or being in a toxic relationship, right? Lust is fun, but what about love? Like, will you be satisfied in a relationship based on lust? Or, will the devil come by and say, I told you so, when you have a nasty, ugly breakup? So I've heard it, someone refer to it as not playing with fire unless you're willing to get burned, right? So I take this card to mean everything in moderation. So I do like to sort of think of this as the I told you so card. Sort of the universe kind of telling you, I told you so. So not really seeing this as more of a, again, sort of free will, and we have free will, so we do make our own decisions. So as human beings, and that's how I read the card. That doesn't mean this is how it should be interpreted. I interpret it based on my own beliefs and based on my knowledge of the tarot and based on how I construct this card and the work I've done with this card, because it's my birth card. In that the devil is not, someone to fear, almost like an advisor, but an advisor that is sort of like not really giving you answers either way. It's sort of like someone who's like, well, that might be fun. Like, that looks like a lot of fun, but this could happen. Or he looks like he might be fun, like a lot of fun to have, have a fling with this one, but like, how is it going to end? And I'm using that very surface level examples of like, but it could just be a warning. So it's like, they say like, the angel, right? And the devil on your shoulder. I feel like the devil's acting as both, right? The devil was an angel, right? Apparently the devil was an angel. But so I see that as being the same, one and the same, as sort of like giving you both sides, or sort of trying to illuminate your relationships with certain things, whether it be addictions, and it can be an addiction to anything. It could be a shopping addiction, a gambling addiction. It could be an eating addiction. You could be addicted to food. You could be addicted to sex, to porn, really, there's addictions upon addictions upon addictions. We can have very toxic and unhealthy relationships with lots of things and lots of people in our lives. And I think this sort of is like the examination of it. And that warning that like, everything in moderation, but, really evaluate, how is it serving you? How is this serving you? And what are you getting out of it? And it's going to take you to take control of that, because you have the control, like, and it gives you back that control. So it's not like you've shackled yourself to certain things. So that's the way that I sort of read this card. And again, that's my interpretation in sort of coming to terms with the devil. I see the devil as more of like a friend, like who might not be that helpful, who points out things, but doesn't really give you any sort of answers, because they're sort of, you have to figure out those answers for yourself. Which kind of leads me to the next card that we're going to talk about. But let's look at some reinterpretations of the devil, because again, I feel like it's perspective, right? Like in terms of the different imagery. So here again, we have the Tarot of the Abyss by Anatorian. So again, I love this deck for its reimaginings, and this card is super powerful. So here we see what looks like a figure who's an angel, right? So we talked about how the devil was an angel, right? In from what we know from the background. And so we see this figure who has angel wings, but they're tethered. They're like literally like stuck to something. They're like, and they're bound by, it almost looks like roots. Like, so it looks like roots in the ground. This looks like something coming up and now has like weaved its way around, right? So this being is shackled to the ground or strapped to the ground, right? So we can think of the ground again as like those, to me, in my opinion, I see that as like the carnal pleasures, right? The earthly pleasures, like the things that we enjoy, materialistic, right? The materialistic things that we enjoy, or engaging in being materialistic or materialism, or putting high importance on things, possessions, or, just being a little hedonistic. I read that as that. And then this sort of being your more evolved self, right? You're transcending, the material realm. And that's the angelic realm. That's sort of that feeling of transcending. So I feel like this is an interpretation of like you grappling with, these things that you might be shackled to that seem a little superficial or hedonistic or carnal, or things that bring you pleasure. And really, how is it serving you? Is it making you feel like this? Are you feeling like you're constricted in the end? Does it really bring you pleasure, or does it really bring you pleasure? Those types of questions. So I love this card for that interpretation. And here again, we have the card from the Tarot of the Hidden Realm. It's called Shadow Dance. So I do love this, because this, again, it's sort of like, like his face is like, this looks like fun. Like, do I want to like engage in a threesome? Like, oh my gosh, that's so bad of me. That's not something I would ever do, but like, it might be fun, So it's sort of like that knowing what your limits are and knowing where we cross into behaviors that's problematic or things that are toxic. It's knowing your limits, it's like, that might be fun. And am I ready for it? Like, I feel like some people can handle things like open relationships, right? And some people can't. They're just not built for it. Or they think they can. They're like, I'm open to this. I'm definitely open to this. And they're like, I don't like this. I'm definitely not open to this. Like, so it's like getting on a ride and being like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm going to go on this roller coaster. And then you like get strapped in and you're like, oh shit, I don't want to go on this ride. Like I want to get off. Like, okay. Like, no, seriously, let me off. Like, it's not fun. I don't feel right. I don't feel safe. This is like where your boundaries are, where your limits are. That's at least how I interpret that card. And then just for fun, I included this card from the Office Tarot. So if you're not an Office fan, you're not going to understand this. But just for fun, I included the Devil from the Office Tarot. So if you're an Office fan, then you know this is Robert California. And Robert California loves a good carnal pleasure, doesn't he? So so this one definitely, you know, great pick for this, you know, with his wine and his little devil tail, his devil horns, because he is one who definitely embraces the carnal pleasures in life. But as we see, he's not so well adjusted. I think as we like go along in the series and we get to know him a little bit, we see, you know, with his son, his relationship with his son and his divorce and his ex-wives and his, you know, and his and he bought the home hoping it would be like a hedonistic layer of like, and it turns out he's just like lonely and, you know, so again, where are our limits, where are our boundaries? Hedonism is fun, but you know what I mean? In the end, is it really serving us? And, you know, and are we just going to end up, you know, in a situation that doesn't serve us and is not good for us? So that's Robert California from the Office Tarot. And if you don't watch The Office, you definitely should because it's amazing. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next one in the Major Arcana that, to me, might not be scary, but one card that always used to stump me, right, is the Moon card. It's sandwiched between the star, right, and the sun, and I would get confused when this arrived in a reading. The word like shadows or shadow work always comes up, I think, in keywords and meanings of this card. It's basically like the Moon card makes you work. You know what I mean? Like, I like to think of this card as the, oh shit, like shit just got real. Like the shit just got real card. Like, but rather than focusing on the unseen and sort of the hidden, like reframe it to represent exploratory energy, right? So you're like a deep sea diver and it's time to get your scuba gear, okay? Because one of my favorite depictions of the Moon card is from the Lightseers Tarot. I'll show you in a minute, but really representing that Pisces watery energy, right? That's intuitive energy. So the Moon card is sort of inviting you to get comfortable with diving into those really deep areas. I also like to think of, and I don't know how I came up with this. I don't know why this came into my brain, but like, this is what happens. So, you know, Facebook relationship statuses, right? So it would be like in a relationship or married or single. Well, I feel like the Moon card is it's complicated of the relationship statuses. It kind of reminds me of knots, like things being tangled in knots or tangled jewelry. Like I once spent 2 hours untangling a necklace from my jewelry box. It's work. And like me being the Capricorn I am stubborn as all hell. And I was not going to let that necklace beat me. Like I was going to take the time to sit there and every single kink, and like I would pull one and it would like knot in another part of the necklace. Man, I was not giving up. I spent 2 hours at least. It's work, right? It's not going to be easy and there's no quick fix, right? So this is to me the card of untangling, right? And like breaking cycles, right? The Moon is all about cycles and its cycle, right? So to me, I see the Moon maybe about breaking cycles. And just like the Moon reflects, so must we reflect, right? On the things that we don't always see or things that, you know, may be hidden real deep and we kind of like dive and we got to do that work. It's untangling. It's untangling a lot of stuff. You know, that's why I call it like, oh, shit just got real. Like, oh, the Moon just showed up in my reading. Like, shit just got real. Like, now I'm going to have to dig deep. Like, that's it. Like, we're going scuba diving, right? You get your scuba gear on because we're scuba diving now. You know, we're digging deep into that Pisces watery energy, the unconscious, you know, nature of our feelings, the unconscious and intuitive nature of feelings and emotions. Like that stuff runs deep and identifying it sometimes is really difficult. So to me, like the Moon is like the card of emotional literacy. Like, and I work with young kids, young children from birth through 5 years old and the people who teach them. So I talk about emotional literacy a lot in my field of work, and I just feel like the moon card is maybe one of those. It's naming the feeling. It's naming the feeling. It's finding the feeling. What is the feeling? That this reading is really about. What's that root feeling? Because we all know, like, the roots, the stuff that's underneath, that's the feelings. That's the emotions. And then the stuff that comes up is the behaviors, right? Is how we're acting on those emotions. So the moon wants us to dig. It wants us to dig deep. And that's just how like I said, I interpret the moon. Let's see. So some moon cards. So again, like I was just saying, the Light Seers Tarot does a wonderful job, I think, of depicting this card. I think this is one of the most beautiful depictions of the moon card. Because of that super watery Pisces energy, right? Like, this is it. Like, this is, and she's deep. She's deep in there, and the moon is shining. Like, there's illumination there from that moon, man. It's shining right through into the water, into that deep stuff. That's shining on. That's illumination. Like, we always think of the sun as being illuminating, right? As like this big illumination and joy and vitality. Well, this moon is illuminating some deep, deep shit. And so this is, I just love this depiction, of her sort of, under the water, and it's just reflecting, man. It's digging deep. It's diving for that stuff that you may not be able to recognize or name, but it's like kind of like you're getting there, you're getting there. So I love this moon card. And then here we have the moon from, again, the Tarot of the Abyss. Again, it just, Anna Torian like knocks it out of the park with just these interpretations of the moon, like just this entanglement with the moon. And here we have a figure on this side, right? Two halves of a whole here. One's like fully clothed, and one's like almost naked, right? That we're almost naked. We're peeling back the layers of this clothing or whatever, this tethered fabric that's coming from the moon, man. The moon is just peeling back those layers, and it's illuminating those things that are underneath, so just this imagery of like peeling back layers of fabric. That's how I'm interpreting it, and I love it. I absolutely am here for this. And this just feels more comforting to me. It's more like I can connect to this and see this as, like, again, like I can visualize what this means to me in the moon card. And then this is the Magical Nature Tarot again. This one really, so like, we talk about like sort of like that madness, like that bang at the moon, right? It's sort of like everyone thinks of the moon as like, it can be the card of like madness or like hysteria, right? It's a full moon. Like everyone always says that, right? That's why everything's, wonky, or like, people are like losing it, because it's a full moon, right? And wolves actually don't howl at the moon. That's sort of a myth, but that's for another video. But this card just to me is like sort of embracing all your wildness, like embracing that wild nature and embracing like those feelings, because like every single feeling we have is valid. So like that stuff that's hidden, those feelings that are hidden, and you have to really dig deep to be like, what is that I'm feeling? What emotion is that's like causing all of this, that's contributing to things that that are that are not going right for me, or just thought patterns that are not serving me. It's like embracing it, even if it's a scary feeling, even if it's a confronting feeling. You have shame, you have doubt, you have fear, you're grappling with things. It's like, that's part of being human. We're going to embrace it. We're going to embrace that side of ourselves. We're going to embrace the wild side of ourselves, that howls at the moon, you know what I mean? And that recognizes that there are shadows and there's shit that we need to uncover, and it's okay. We can do it in a safe space, and we can embrace that. So that's the Magical Nature Tarot. Just love that interpretation. Okay, so now that we've reflected on the moon and on our shit, and now we come to Judgment. So Judgment, right? So all I know about Judgment is that after the sun, right, after that warmth and vitality, I really don't want to be judged. Like, I used to really get confused when this card showed up in readings. I was like, can't you just leave me with the sun, or can you give me the world? Like, can we just moving along over this judgment thing. Can we just skip this whole judgment thing? But this card is not so much about outside judgment, but the way we judge ourselves. And I think, with the imagery in the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith, it feels very like other. It feels like another being is judging us, right? There's a very religious aspect to this, especially with this, right? This sort of like ascending into heaven, sort of like the sky. It's abstract. For me, I look at it more as like, it's the way we judge ourselves. To me, this is the card of like owning your shit. You know what I mean? Like, you need to own it. If you're going to judge yourself, own your shit. Like, why, yes, I was an asshole and I did try to gaslight you in this situation. But guess what? I took a scuba diving lesson with my friend the Moon, and I've explored that. And I've decided to give myself grace and accept the areas I need to work on. And then I show up for myself and I'm authentic and I'm transparent in my everyday life. And then guess what? I accept that in others as well. I feel like judgment shows up when I need a little reminder that I'm not perfect, right? And that's okay. And that's how I try to read judgment, not so much. It's basically, like I said, owning your shit, like that stuff that you uncovered and in the Moon card, it's part of who you are, and it's made you who you are. And and no matter if it was serving you or not, it served something. It served a purpose for you. And it's like, you got to be authentic and transparent, right? It's like that realization, right? That, hey, you know what? Sometimes I do this. Sometimes I gaslight people and I don't even know I'm doing it. And you know what? I'm going to get better at that. And I'm going to uncover why I do that. And I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to work on it. You know what I mean? But you know what? I'm not going to fix it tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm not going to wake up and be a perfect person, right? I need grace, and I need to accept that it's going to take me time and it's going to take me work. We're working through this Major Arcana, and then we get to the Minor Arcana, and that's like our day-to-day shit. This is like our day-to-day monotony, right? The monotony of the Minor Arcana. So, we got a long ways to go. Judgment is like giving yourself grace, and it's sort of integrating everything that you've like already uncovered about yourself and integrating that into yourself and integrating it into your healing and your work you're doing, and like just accepting it for what it is, and trying to figure out, how it fits in. And you let go of the shit that doesn't serve you anymore. In death, you've transformed, you know what I mean? You've dived, you scuba dived with the Moon, like I said. And now we are here at Judgment. And before we can get to the world and sort of that completion, that sort of evolution, that like full circle, we got to accept who we are. We have to accept who we are. And we have to accept all the good and all the bad, and we're not perfect. And so that's how I read judgment. It's like being judgy of yourself, but that sort of self-compassion, having compassion for yourself, and not so much outside sources judging, being judgy. Again, I read this for a very in a very introspective way. So it doesn't mean that's what it means for you. So here's some judgy judgment cards. Actually, they're non-judgy judgment cards. Anatorian again with the Tarot of the Abyss. This is called Awakening. Oh my God. So yes, exactly what I was just saying about sort of that integration of like this base self and this higher, right? We saw the devil who was like, looked like an angel, and he was like strapped to the ground here. This integration of your base self, and your transcended and higher order thinking self, right? The ones who can recognize now, oh wait, I took a scuba dive with the Moon and I recognize it, right? And you can recognize what it is and why you're doing it. And now you can like move forward and you can accept it as part of yourself and you integrate it into yourself. It's like becoming one being. To me, this is like the transcendent self came down to the base self to get it and incorporate it back into its body. Accept it. Accept all that the baseness of you. You're a human being. Accept all of it. And then integrate it, into one person. You're not perfect. So I love this card for integration. Again, the Lightseers Tarot, just bringing the different way of looking at these cards, man. You can say what you want about the Lightseers Tarot, but Chris-Anne is kind of a genius in some ways with these cards, at least in my humble opinion. Like, look at this, man. We're just embracing it, right? She's like, it's like that surrender, right? Look at her arms and the way she's looking up. It's surrender, man. She is surrendering those feelings of like, I'm not good enough and I'm not perfect. And she's like, I'm not perfect. Here it is. You know what I mean? And I'm like going to just be my joyful, authentic self and transparent. You know, I'm just going to be out there in the world, you know? One of these things, and this is like a side note, but one of the things that like, it's funny, like that I've been trying to work on in my own personal relationships is just telling people what I need, right? Instead of doing the dance, like you figure it out. Like, you know, how is someone supposed to figure out what I need unless I communicate that to them? So just, what do I need? What do I need? I tell my partner, I need a hug. Can you please hug me? And he hugged me. He hugged me. He hugs me. You know what I mean? That's what I need at that moment. Can you just give me 5 moments? Like it's not, I just need 5 minutes to just, you know, clear my head for a second. I'm going to go for a walk. That's what I need. Man, I need to be transparent, right? So this is the judgment card, man. This is me. This is authentic. This is transparency. This is just me accepting me for who I am and integrating all of it. So I love that from the Light Seers. And then, of course, Tarot of the Hidden Realm, favorite deck. So sorry, it's always going to be incorporated, but this is called Life Renewed. Man, like when you start to accept yourself, and this is not, like I'm not on a soapbox. I'm just sharing my experience here. I'm not on like a positive, like all love and light, because I got a ton of work I have to do. But just the little tiny pieces that I can accept about myself and I recognize has been so beneficial. And it does feel like a renewal. It feels like, hey, I'm going to start telling people what I need instead of like making them guess or getting mad at them when they can't guess and then taking it personally. And then I shut down. And then, so just all these patterns and things like that I've seen in my own life, it's life renewed, man. Judgment is not about judging. You know, no one's judging. We're not being judged, you know, and it's just about accepting all those bad and good parts of ourselves, you know? So I love this Life Renewed. I like the name of it. And then just because for fun, we talked about heavy stuff. I was talking some heavy stuff, but this is from the Office Tarot. So this is the Judgment card from the Office Tarot. And again, I apologize if you don't watch The Office. You skip right over this. Just, you know, end the video now. But this is Dwight, and this is Angela's cat, Sprinkles. And if you've watched the show, you know Dwight made some really tough decisions about what he should do for Sprinkles. You know, Dwight's a farmer, man. You know, he just, you know, he sees death every day with animals, and it sort of like rolls off of his back. But Sprinkles is like Angela's life along with her 4,000 other cats. But so, you know, Sprinkles looks like she's judging Dwight a little bit because, you know, Dwight may have put her in a freezer while she was still alive. So, you know, Dwight needs to reckon with the fact that he thought he was being nice. He thought he was putting her out, you know, it was calm and gentle. He thought so. He didn't realize she was still alive, you know, so, you know, he had good intentions and he may not have, you know, thought it all the way through. So, you know, he's not perfect. He tried. He was doing his Dwight's very best. He was doing the best that Dwight can do. So, again, if you don't watch The Office, I'm sorry, but this is hysterical. And they did a phenomenal job with this deck in picking the cards and matching them to scenes from that show. 100%. 100% recommend if you're an Office fan. So that is the Judgment. So this video is just going to cover those Major Arcana because we'll be here all day if I talk about all the scary cards. So that's it for the Major Arcanas. I feel like a lot of attention is always given to the Major Arcanas. You know, with this series, I want to really focus on those minor cards that can be really confusing and confronting and make people uncomfortable, aka the Swords. So in the next installment, we're going to look at the Cups and the Pentacles suit, as these, in my opinion, do not contain as many scary cards as, let's say, the disaster that is the Sword suit. So please let me know in the comments below which cards in the Cups and the Pentacles suit you may feel, you know, like are a little scary or uncomfortable when they appear in readings, and let's see if we can work through them together and maybe reframe some of the meanings or make them easier to understand. And stay tuned for the Wands and Sword suit after we tackle Cups and Pentacles. I look forward to talking about how I embraced the Two of Swords as my card of the year for last year, and I got really comfy with all those sharp objects showing up in my readings all the time. So I so appreciate you joining me on my tarot journey and listening to my personal takes on these cards. Please share your thoughts and opinions in the comments. Let me know which cards, you know, are confusing for you or feel confronting. And you have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!